Rayleigh. Okay. Yeah. Good evening, afternoon. Hello. I'd like to welcome you to Lewistown Livestock Auction. I'm Joel Sewell. I'm field rep for Kyle here at the market. Kyle is at a bull sale and probably has it pegged to the floor on his way here right now. So he'll be here about 6:30 is what we're told. So would just like to welcome you. Like I said, I'm the field rep for Kyle. I've gotten to know a lot of you through the country, shipped some calves for some of you and shaking hands and had lots of good laughs together, and hope to get to know more of you as I make my rounds in the country. But yeah, I'd like to welcome you. I think it's a wonderful opportunity we have to get together tonight and talk about an industry that we all love. Before I do that, speaking of what we love, this is Bridget. She's our secretary here. Many of you guys talked to her on the phone. And but yeah, we'll just get together and talk about how we can be more sustainable, do things better, and appreciate the work the stock growers is doing. I'm a member myself, so appreciate the work they're doing to create sustainability and long-termness for our industry that we love. So I'm going to hand it off to Rayleigh, and she'll take it from here. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll have you hand the mic to John. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rayleigh Honeycutt, the Executive Vice President of the Montana Stock Growers Association. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us this evening. Really excited. This is a great crowd, and really looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have. Before we jump into it too much, I would like to pass it over to our president, John Grandy, who's going to do a few quick introductions.
Thanks. I would just add to what's already been said. Welcome. We really appreciate you all showing up and being here this afternoon. We look forward to the discussion we're going to have with you. Yeah, I would like to introduce the folks here from Stock Growers. Rayleigh, you going to get staff, or you want me to get staff? Or well, we'll start with staff. Okay, so you already met our Executive Vice President, Rayleigh Honeycutt. We've got our membership services person, Ian Kane, right here. A lot of you know Ian Kane. Heidi Cool with our foundation. I don't know if Heidi's around. Oh, she's right there. Just couldn't see it. And Ellie Brighton, our policy person, is back here with the computer and everything. I think that's it. Did I miss anybody? We've also got our board of directors here, our first vice president, Leslie Robinson, second vice president, Turk Stovall, you're going to be hearing from a little later. And we have, I think, two of our directors. We have Kirk Donsbach and Ian Glennie. I think that's everybody. Did I miss anybody? I'd also like to make just a couple quick introductions. Probably won't appreciate this, but I'd like to introduce John Lewis, because we're going to be talking about some things tonight that he's integral in. John Lewis is right here. John's representing the Montana stock growers on a task force that the Department of Revenue has put together, looking at ag property taxes and basically property tax classifications. And he's been gracious enough to serve on that. They've had 3 meetings already where he's represented us, and he really needs your input and ideas on things that they can help with. I'd also like to introduce, if we have any elected representatives or officials, delegates from our people. I know Jesse Anderson. Where's Jesse? Yep, Jesse Anderson from Senator Tester's office is here. Anybody else from any of our congressional delegations? Oh, hi, Tori. Thank you very much. Anybody else? We also have Rick Holden is here, who's running for the Eastern District congressional seat. So we appreciate Rick being here. With that, again, just welcome, and I'm going to turn this back over to Rayleigh. Shane, you bet. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Just a few housekeeping items before we get the evening started too much. One, you are being photographed. We are live streaming and recording our evening's events, so we would like to make everybody aware of that. In addition to that, we want to thank some sponsors and supporters that have made this roadshow that we're doing possible. The Livestock Market Association, the Montana Auction Yards, all of the local auctions who have been so graciously allowing us to come to their venues and have our meetings there, as well as the Hike and Ranch and Compass Ag. So some great supporters. In addition to that, the vaccine cooler that you all hopefully signed up for is sponsored by Western Ranch Supply and Bollringer Ingelheim. So, and we have a representative from BI here with us today. So excited, and thank you to all of those who are sponsoring these listening sessions. So I'm going to hand it over to Turk, and Turk's going to kind of give you an overview of where we're at as it relates to producer profitability and where we are going. And so the evening will be a quick overview, then we'll move into some interactive portions. So if you do not have one of these sheets yet, please raise your hand, and some of our staff will be handing those out to you. That has the interactive portion that you'll need instructions. And then we'll open it up to general comments and a listening session. So that's where you come into play. We will be opening up the floor for you to kind of talk about things that are on your mind, challenges you're facing, or ideas that you might have for the industry as we move into the future. So with that, Turk, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Ray Lee, and thank you, John. And thank you all for being here tonight. Again, my name's Turk Stovall. I'm a second vice president for Montana Stock Growers. My family ranch is south of Billings. We have a feed yard there, and we also have a feed yard out of Shepherd as well. And just to kind of lay the groundwork for tonight, there's quite a bit of background. And producer profitability actually started from a group of ranchers talking that came out of a working group that LMA put on here a couple years ago. And what in that working group is really to address some pretty serious things. And one of those is, golly, can we all get on the same page as an industry and join together and actually really work together on some topics that are really important to this industry? And, you know, just to steal some words from Joe Goggins, he goes, we have a lot of good organizations across our industry, and they might have different number one topics, but could we all get together and agree on a number two topic? And so with that said, some of our ground rules we're going to use from those working groups that have been very effective, and we're going to say, hey, there's some topics out there in this industry. It doesn't seem like we can get all on the same page, or we just can't seem to get to a conclusion. Country of origin labeling, the beef checkoff, the markets, the fed cattle market or feeder cattle market. That is not what tonight's meeting's about. Tonight's meetings is saying, hey, you know what, those are topics that doesn't seem like we get on the same page. We've been talking about them for a long time, but let's just set these over to the side, and we're just not going to talk about them. But what we are going to talk about is how are we going to entice the next generation to take over our hard work? How are we going to make sure that this is a sustainable business that's going to go on for generations to come? The one thing that COVID really did teach us all is we all learned that we're essential. There's not very many people out there willing to go and feed the cows every day when you don't feel good, but we had to. And there's not every day that you want to go out and it's 30 below and make sure that the water's going, but we had to. And that we are such an important part of the American fiber, and we have to make sure that we replace ourselves. And how do we do that? So what we did is we came up with some resolutions. And these resolutions came from board members that worked in that working group with LMA and says, hey, how can we get to create a difference and bring this to our organization? And so resolutions were presented this last December at the annual Stock Growers Convention, and it was heavily discussed, it was debated, it was changed, and then went through the whole process, and these resolutions passed as well as a directive. And that directive is telling your Montana Stock Growers board directors and officers to say, hey, let's try to create some unity in this business. Let's go out and try to really get in there and address some topics that we need some wins. And we need to try to get us all working together, and maybe we have different organizations that we don't have the same number one, but can we say, hey, can we agree on the number two, and let's get something done? Because right now we're running out of time. Just when we start talking about taxes, the tax codes are going to change. This estate tax is going to sunset and change. What are we going to do about it? So with that context, we brought up 5 different points for us to talk about. Now, are these the 5 points that solve all? No. But there's been a lot of discussion on we have to start somewhere. And this is where we're starting. And we wanted to go out and talk with real farmers and ranchers across our great state and get feedback, create an open dialogue of what is going to make a difference on your operations and really what's going to make a difference of the next generation in taking over. And so with that said, these 5 points, taxes. Can we create a good tax climate? This state tax is obviously one of the biggest topics that have come across all of our listening sessions. The other thing that has come up is accelerated depreciation. That's set to also starting to expire. Another topic that's come up for discussion is back to where we talked about us being essential. Should the essential protein producers of the United States be looked at differently? And should they be under really a different type of tax code? And maybe that's where we would get into where some efforts are already being done on the state level. The next topic, government programs. What are their role in the livestock business? You know, we have government involved in the livestock business. Is that what we really want? Probably most of us are going to say no. But when we were in that working group and we said, all right, when these COVID checks came out, who did not cash their check? It just so happened no one raised their hand. But I want to get to what government programs are working. You know, we have the FSA programs. We heard from younger farmers and ranchers in their previous meetings. Hey, one comment was, yes, there is support out there, but they give you just enough money to hang yourself. Or what about some of these other subsidized programs? LRP. LRP has been a really, really big topic. And when we get to that point, Kurt, we'll probably have you come down and maybe just give a brief update on that. But what is LRP? Does everybody know? And we'll go through that. It's been a really great tool. How can we make it better? Labor. There's probably not a ranch here that doesn't sit and talk about, I need more help. And how am I going to get that help? And where do I go? We've talked a lot about the H-2A programs and their roles. You know, the H-2A programs were originally put together for row crop farmers. Can we look at them to make them even more beneficial for livestock ranches? And last on the list, which has brought just a tremendous amount of interest and a lot of great dialogue, is mentorship. You know, we do have examples of ranches across our great state to where either the kids don't want to come home or there aren't any kids, but how can we create a mentorship where that ranch works with another young beginning producer to help them get going? Or maybe gives them a favorable lease. Or maybe it's just, you know, I know when I first started to get going, my dad co-signed me to get some cows. Well, not everybody has that opportunity. And so how can we create that? So with all that said, Ray Lee, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through these and we're going to create really a discussion points and talk about those. But prior to that, we have a great interactive survey system, and Ray Lee will take it from there.
All right, so everyone that has a cell phone, please grab it out of your pocket and get it ready to be used. I will also have you flip to the second page of the handout that we provided you. It looks like this, and it says Menti at the top of it. We did run out of handouts, so you might have to borrow your neighbors, but there's a QR code. So if you're not familiar with how a QR code works, you can open up a camera on your phone, and if you scan that QR code, which you just have to put it in the picture lens, it will give you a website. You can click on that website and open it up, and then highlighted on your sheet is a 8-digit code, and that code is 58812910, and that will get you to our interactive survey that we're about to go through. So we'll give you a few minutes. If you're not familiar with QR codes, we have a couple staff people that can run around and help you get your phone set up, Ian and Heidi. If your neighbor doesn't have a piece of paper, borrow their piece of paper, and we will get started in just a few minutes. Yep. Hey, Ellie, I'm trying to click it. All right, we have our first question up. So once you're logged in, you will see a question. Just hang tight as other folks get their screens pulled up. Anybody need help? Ian is just ready to help someone. All right. You can watch it there if you want. Everybody good? Thumbs up if you are seeing this first question. Okay. Awesome. All right. So the first question we have for you is, when you think about producer profitability, what 3 words come to mind? So you can enter those into your screen, click submit, and they will start populating onto the screen. For those of you who aren't familiar with how a word cloud works, once entries start coming in, you'll begin to see a word bubble pop up. The bigger the word within the word cloud, the more times that word has been submitted to us. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of see from your area and within your peers, what are the most important thoughts around producer profitability.
So it's been interesting just watching this from each sale barn we've been to, and just the similarities and just a few differences. But especially with this question here, sustainable has more times than not been really the main answer here. But just to share, I know some of these are kind of small, but we have sustainable, taxes, money, markets, profit, growth, positive cash flow, finance, transparency, regulations, expenses, prices, living, capital, necessary, lease ground, succession.
All right, it looks like it's slowing down a little bit, so I'll give you about 5 more seconds to submit your answers, and then we'll move on to the next slide. All right, in 20 words or less, share with us the biggest challenges you face in your operations growth and success. We're seeing a lot of things that maybe fall into the buckets that Turk highlighted earlier: access to land, generational turnover, cash flow, drought, opportunities to grow. opportunities to expand, transition to the next generation. This is all great feedback. So as you guys are kind of submitting your answers, we are doing this at every listening session, and at the end of all 12 listening sessions, we'll be compiling reports to find out where there's similarities or if there's geographical differences that may be based off community or geographic region. So we're really interested to see how that breaks out.
I see it finally came up there is just the high interest rates. That's been a big topic as well.
All right, we will give a few more seconds and then move on to the next one. All right, next question. In the last 10 years, what tools or programs have been the most beneficial for your operations profitability? And Leoma Wells is in the audience, so someone better put DNA testing. Here we're seeing, some government programs, but also just seeing some maybe management decisions too, which is great to see. Bull selection, AI, LRP, we see a lot of LRP, FSA. Intensive grazing. Regenerative ag workshops, access to capital. Okay, it looks like everyone has those submitted. So we will head to the next question, which is, what do you believe the biggest challenge for the livestock industry will be in the next 20 years? The first two we see are very, very common ones that we see. Government regulation seems to be by far one of the largest concerns we're seeing from producers. Okay, go ahead, Turk.
I'll just say some of these smaller ones, we have access to land, we have public perception. Gosh, I can't hardly read.
I was
either,
going to
really.
compliment you on your eyesight.
Yeah.
I was very impressed by that.
Interest is in there again.
All right. And then our last question of this segment, oops, double click that. Regarding succession planning, share with us which category most relates to you. I am a young producer who is entering the business or transitioning into an operation. I do not have a succession plan. I am in the process of finalizing a succession plan. I have a succession plan. I plan to exit the livestock industry, or this is not applicable to me. What's really interesting to me about this, and I'm going to do some analysis as we're live here, but no matter kind of the average age of our crowd, the majority of the crowd is saying that they're transitioning into a succession plan. So I find that really interesting that it's a long process and can happen at many different stages of life.
Well, the targets change, so you
Yeah.
have to change your plan all the time.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, we will have you put your phones down. Don't close out because we have a couple wrap-up questions at the end. But at this time, I'm going to hand it back over to Turk, and he's going to kind of kick off our opening listening session. That really is a time for us to hear from you. Ellie's taking notes. Like I mentioned, we'll be putting together a report. I'll have some staff running mics, so if you're interested in making comments, we would love to hear from you. And so with that, Turk, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ray Lee. So we're going to we're breaking this up, and we're just trying to keep it as organized as possible. And I don't know if we have the right format or not, but it seems to be working as we've have been putting these on. But if we could just take the next 10 or 15 minutes and really focus on talking about taxes. And for sure, the elephant in the room is the estate tax. And you know, I'm actually, John does a great job of explaining this, and just maybe give the little of the background is what's going to be happening here with the estate taxes if nothing's done, John.
Well, most of you are pretty aware of this, but you know, our position has been for years, we don't like the estate tax. We think it's an unfair tax after you've, you know, paid income tax on your money all these years and you get taxed again at death. So total elimination is obviously the preferred alternative, but what if you can't get that done? You know, right now we have estate tax rules where you have an individual exemption that's indexed for inflation. So today it's somewhere north of $13 million for an individual. So 26, close to 27 million for a man and wife. Along with that, there's a stepped up basis that comes into play. Those regulations or those tax rules expire on January 1st of 2026. So we've got a year and a half to do something about that. The challenge about this is, you know, if we get along fine, you know, I shouldn't say this with Jesse and everybody in the room, we get along fine counting on Congress to do nothing, because a lot of times nothing's exactly what they do. In this case, Congress needs to act. If Congress doesn't act and do some kind of new rules or extend those current rules, then in a year and a half, we revert back to $5 million. And of course, Congress could act and make an exemption even lower than that. And at $26 million, you know, there's a lot of ranches represented in this room that are probably covered under that, and quite a few that probably aren't, but it's a good chunk. If you get back to a $5 million exemption, that's kind of catastrophic to most ranches, and not just ranches. You get down in that level, you're affecting a lot of Main Street businesses in town and everything. So we need to get some kind of action on the estate tax in the next year and a half. There are bills introduced currently in both houses of Congress to do something about it. I don't expect any action to happen this year. Those bills for this year are probably just kind of placeholders, but they're there, you know, getting attention, getting people talking about it. you know, it's going to be next year when the big push has got to be on. Something's got to happen.
Thank you, John. Now, what we'll do is just, if anybody wants to make any comments or anything, just at any given time, just raise your hands and we'll hand you the mic. I would like to see if, could you maybe just give a little bit of an update on our state tax committee and some of the things you guys are working on right now? Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? So I don't want to bore you with this, and a lot of you already know this, but as it stands right now, you know, agriculture is in a class by itself, and we're taxed on a productive value rather than a marketable value. Now your homes and your commercial properties are taxed by marketable value. So, you know, if you look at your tax bill, you'll see grassland, irrigated land, farmland, it's all taxed according to what that land should be able to produce. Well, if you own between 20 and 159 acres, you have to show $1,500 worth of gross agricultural income to qualify. Now, if you own 160 or better, you're automatically qualified, which is great for producers in a way because we reap that benefit without having to prove anything. But as you all know, statewide, we've seen so much property being bought up and taken out of production. And do we think that's still fair that they reap the benefit of ag classification? So that's kind of where we're at. So I guess I would love to have any input from anybody if you think that's fair, or if we should classify that land separately, maybe try to pass some of our tax burden on to those properties that are now out of production. So if you have any input, I'd love to hear it. None.
Be sure you state your name.
Chuck Ryan from down at Millville, and I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but one thing that does strike me is that a lot of our lands, it's down in Sweetgrass County, it's very true, and likely here as well, are being bought up by non-resident, out-of-state wealthy folks that have no intention of making or don't even want to make money in agriculture. I think those lands really are recreational lands. And if we had a ability to pass some of our tax burden from property right or property right ranches, property ranches that produce livestock and other crops onto recreational ranches, and shift some of that burden over there, because they don't care about the money. And if we could lighten our burden a little bit, I'm not asking about adding more taxes, that just doesn't work, but if we could shift some of the burden onto recreational property. Is there a higher classification now for recreational property? And I'll sit down.
You know, as far as I know, there is not. You know, if you're in that 160 acres or better, you automatically qualify for the ag classification. And in my mind, I think some of that tax burden could be shifted to, and I'm not trying to punish those people by any means, but this was done as an incentive for agriculture to keep land in production, and they realized the importance of agriculture, you know, feeding the entire world, and food and fiber, you're not meeting that requirement, so there should be another classification, I think. So that lies the problem. How do we prove that? How do we prove our productivity? And that's where I don't want to harm all of you, because I'm one of you, you know. I don't want to make this hard for you by any means. But if we're going to make them prove their productivity, we're going to have to do the same. So, you know, first of all, is that something everybody would be willing to do if it's kept simple? And I think I see a few nods. Anybody I've talked to says yes. But let's keep it simple, you know. And then the other problem we're having now is how much productivity do we have to prove? We got to keep that a sustainable number, something that's obtainable from year to year on a drought year, you know. Every year's so different in agriculture, so it's not a simple thing. Percentage of your gross income? Well, it could be, but you look at, well, I don't want to pick on anybody, but you look at like the Wilkes brothers, they've come in, bought a lot of property, but yet it remains in agriculture. But where's the percentage of their income come from? You know, not agriculture. So I guess where we're leaning, we're not to the stage of solution stage yet, but where we're leaning is a dollar amount per acre of gross, that is, because some years there is no net, but gross agricultural income. And we got to keep it light. And there's going to be loopholes no matter what we do. And these guys are going to find it. You know, they're going to get 50 cows and they're going to meet the requirement. But there has to be some level of proof, and it has to be easily obtainable, and it can't be a huge burden. It sounds simple. So if you have ideas, shoot them my way, because there's two of us producers in the state, myself and Cindy Johnson, are the two representing our entire industry, and it's a huge weight. You know, I don't want to do anything to harm any of you out there, so any ideas would be very much appreciated.
Jesse Olson, Lewistown. So another question for you is, could it be a possibility if there was, you were talking about loopholes that they will find, so could a loophole be if we give them incentive to lease that property into productive agricultural, that they can keep their tax stance without pushing that?
Well, yeah, definitely. That's not a loophole to me. That's showing some productivity on your ranch.
Leslie Robinson, and that's one of the comments that I've heard too, is how do we incentivize the people that have purchased ranches and taken it out of production? And I see it like you're saying, it could be more of an incentive rather than a punishment, I guess, and maybe that will get more young people or neighbors that want to or need to expand, give an opportunity to do it.
Anybody else?
One of the main problems we come up with now, I think we've all on the task force have kind of agreed that we need to prove productivity somehow. Maybe so many dollars per acre is fair. It doesn't matter if you own 20 acres, 20,000 acres, 200,000 acres, if you have to meet a certain dollar amount. Now, the big problem is, what's that dollar amount? If you're farming, if you're not making $10 an acre, you're starving to death. But if you have grass that's this tall and it's dry and you're putting cows out on it, especially if you're leasing, sometimes $10 an acre is too much. And I didn't realize that till I got to putting a pencil to it, but it can become too much in a hurry. So do you go to $5 an acre? Do you make each ranch or farm meet a different requirement based on their productivity? Well, you say something like that and the Department of Revenue they turn green, because they don't want to be the ones out there deciding what your property can produce. And to be honest, we don't want them doing that. I mean, we don't want them deciding who's a cowboy. So
Any other comments or feedback?
Chris Deschmaker from Lewistown. My thought is, how many people in this room that are in agriculture production also use their land as recreational value and get a payment from that in some way or the other. You have to take into account how's that going to affect that, you know, that young son who you bring back to the ranch that needs that extra income. He's got the hunting. That's recreational. How do you deal with that in this also?
Any other comments or? Okay, we're just going to, oh, go ahead.
I don't mean to make this drag on, but that's a good point. And I mean, in our mind, that's agricultural income, you know, but I guess, is it or isn't it? And as a government payment, agricultural income, if you put your land in CRP and go south, is that agricultural income? I mean, there's a lot of little things to think about. And it's going to be a tough one. If we do come up with something to send to the legislature, it's going to be a tough one to pass, because there are so many little loopholes like this and in different scenarios in every different operation.
You know, just to hit on the estate tax one more time, just some comments that came up in the last couple of meetings was, okay, you know, as protein producers, ranches, we just don't feel like this state tax is fair. And, but is that, how likely is it for us to get it eliminated? And let's just say, hey, maybe that's a low probability. But maybe it's a higher probability of that maybe we can at least maintain what we have now, or some combination of that. Well, if we do have some exemptions, but you still have some tax liability, can you look at that tax liability and say, hey, if this is going to go to the next generation, I want to give this to my children, and that tax liability is $3 million or to $5 million, whatever it is. But to incentivize them to keep that ranch in production, can you say, we are going to forgive that tax liability if we keep it in production and we keep it in the next generation? And the scenario that was brought up in Glasgow was, hey, that could be for 10 years. So like, let's say your child takes it over and he sells it in 2 years. Well, he would only get the forgiveness of 2 years of that 10 years. And he wouldn't get the maximum of that unless he kept that in production for at least 10 years. So these are just ideas that are coming back out of these listening sessions. And it's just an idea. But that is what we need. We need those ideas. And so if you have thoughts like that, please, this is where we want to hear it. If it can't come out today, just we'll say this over and over. Rayleigh and their team did a great job on our website at mtbeef.org. You can go on there and there's a place where you can give feedback, you know, or call the office or call me or John or Leslie and we can talk about it. And that's, sometimes we get the most business done when this is over with and we're out, you know, getting ready to go home and we're in the parking lot. But, you know, just think about that. I mean, this is where we're trying to really get into the details to really make a difference. Bring up tax the whole time here. We're going to move on to government programs. You know, what is the role of government in the livestock business? You know, we have subsidized insurance. We have federal crop, rain insurance. The one that's for sure has been a really hot topic is LRP. And what has been interesting is there's just been a lot of producers that are not really familiar with LRP. And we've taken some time to really talk about that. And so I'm just going to hand it over to Kurt, and Kurt, just give a high level of what it is and how some producers are utilizing that.
Thanks, Turk. As Turk mentioned, my name is Kurt Donsbach. I think I know most everybody in the room. Show of hands, how many people know what LRP is, or at least have heard of it? Oh, a big majority. That was better than I expected. So roughly speaking, LRP is a hedge to protect the value of your cattle. You're hedging the feeder index, the cash feeder index. How many people know what the cash feeder index is? So not as many. That's the cash average, oversimplified, that's the cash average today in the US. So you're hedging, you're protecting the cash average. And you pay for that, it's about $10. It's actually about $14, and it's subsidized, so it's about 8 to 10 out of pocket roughly. And then so if the feeder index is below where you protected, you'll get that value back. And then you use, we call it the basis, and in our terms in this room, it's slid. So the feeder index is an 800 pounder. If you're protecting $200 feeder index and you're selling 6 weights, you'd figure you're, at least 20 over that conservatively. So you'd be protecting 220. It's a way to protect your calves, and the government subsidizes it to try to make it more affordable. When do you pay for it? You pay, a good point, you pay for it at the end. So the open market tools that I use, you have to pay for all those up front. This tool, you don't have to pay for till the end. Another key, really important thing is it's settled at a specific date. You cannot settle any other time. So you need to make sure you mesh up when you're going to price your cattle to when it's settled. It's not like the open market when you can buy it and sell it whenever you want. And then specifically, and I don't want to go too deep into this, when you can use LRP for the lighter calves and they do a bunch of adjustments on them, know that you're still hedging the feeder index. You're not hedging a 600-pound calf. You're not hedging your calf. So big takeaway, you're hedging the average cash price in the U.S. You are not hedging your specific calf. On that note, it's a wonderful product. It fits some people perfectly. It's not the best all the time, especially for bigger guys that can, 10, 20 loads, you can use different tools. But for a small guy, like a guy with 37 cows, nothing better. Absolutely the best.
Can you talk a little bit about the unborn option?
So the unborn would be the calves. When you got a quote from insurance agent, he would give you a number. It's a very, very high number. It's probably, $290 right now, maybe even $3. I haven't looked in a bit. That is not where the feeder that is not the price of the feeder index that you're covering. So there's a 10% adjustment, 5% adjustment that goes into that. And I don't want to get too deep into the math here, but you got to take all that out. At the end of the day, you're hedging the cash index. Like if you just had them quote class 2 steer, so an 800-pound steer, that's the price you're protecting. But to Turk's point, the unborn is specifically for most of our calves in this room. And you can do them specifically unborn. I think most of us now would go into the next category, class 1 steer. So that'd be a lighter steer that's born. And that one has a 10% adjustment.
So LRP is it's a tool, and it's a subsidized tool. So what our policy at Stock Wars was say, hey, we think this is a good tool, but we think it needs some tweaks. So the tweaks that our policy is having us look into is, should we consider the subsidy to be a little greater, especially to try to make this even a better tool for younger producers? The next one is when Andy and myself are buying cattle off the Superior Video in the summer, we want to be able to utilize an LRP because we are taking price risk on that day. One of the rules of LRP is you can't use it until you have physical possession of the cattle. So we are, taking the price risk in June and July, but those animals aren't going to come in our possession, and let's say until the fall, October. So we want to be able to utilize this tool when you're buying the video cattle. It would be one example. But if there's any other examples of how you think the LRP could be improved, or if there should be any other programs out there, definitely looking for that feedback. Any other questions or thoughts on the LRP?
Why don't you just increase the subsidy for the BFR, the beginning farmer rancher?
Say your name and then.
Oh, Teresa Beglin. I'm from Judith Gap. Why don't you increase the subsidy for your beginning farmer rancher? Because that's technically who you're trying to get the biggest bang for your buck out of. So maybe increase that subsidy for an LRP.
And so just to talk it back, so the suggestion is hey, maybe we could relook at the subsidy for an LRP to be greater for a beginning farmer rancher. Yep, great feedback.
If you'd want to give our specific policy on that topic specifically. Or Rayleigh can. Doesn't have to be word for word.
Yeah, and more or less, I think what Kurt's getting is our whole policy is driven towards the younger farmer and rancher. Yep. Any other questions or thoughts relative to LRP? Yes. So it's a great question. The comment for everyone online was, hey, could you give some sort of reference point to what is a young farmer and rancher? Well, this number has been talked about. They think the average age of the beginning farmer and rancher today is 47. And so obviously that has changed over time. So not everybody is coming home to the ranch right after high school. You know, and I think we all have different examples, but a lot of times, you know, kids maybe went to college or military or worked for somebody else, and then, you know, maybe, as you know, there has to be everyone has to be on the same page when you come home, right? So, you know, dad's got to have the same idea that the son does, and sometimes that's a little more complicated than most people understand, but yes.
I'm David Vall. That we don't get our feet too deep into asking for more government programs. I think most of the people in the room would just as soon get their paycheck from the marketplace. And some of the programs that we have, I think are well-intentioned and are probably okay, but let's not get too involved with it, or the government will be running your place for you.
Yeah, great point. Ian?
Yeah, my name's Ian Glennie. I'm from Judith Gap. Kind of the quick little point as what a young farmer and rancher is, I guess. In my personal experience, like if you go to the FSA office, say to farm or something, if you've been on their books for 10 years, then you no longer qualify as a young or beginning farmer and rancher. That's one thing that I personally think can be improved and improvised. You know, like, for example, for me to go in and but be able to have funds easily accessible in already existing government programs. So, like, I've personally been leasing some farm ground from my family for 10 years now. So, like, the beginning farmer and rancher loan and some of these other subsidized loans, I'm technically not available to receive those anymore. So that's tough because, you know, on their books, I've been technically farming for 10 years, but I have not had any available land to purchase that hasn't either been inflated by rec value or something that's just not even close to attainable. So I technically don't qualify for any of those already existent government programs anymore. I think there's a way to tweak those so that I mean, I'm just using myself as an example, but anybody who has been on the books for 10 years, if you haven't had an opportunity to purchase or put those LRPs or whatever into play, and I think there's an opportunity to also raise the funding. 'Cause right now, I think the new beginning farmer and rancher loan is capped at $600,000. That's great, don't get me wrong, but I think everybody in here knows that that's not going to get you very far purchasing land these days, especially with what these outside values are bringing. I mean, it's, as Chert kind of mentioned earlier, it's a good way to hang yourself if you think that you get in a hurry to access those funds. You better be careful, because you're going to run out of time, get in a hurry, and it might not end well, but just so you can have access to those funds.
Yep. You can't. You
So
gotta
when
be
we were in
online.
Billings, after you went beyond beginning, in my mind,
Just so the online folks.
Yep. I'll start it over. Kurt Donsbach, Roy. So in my mind, it's kind of a beginning farmer with probably a fairly older age. At our convention this year, it was I would say unanimous for as much as we can do for that group of people. Then it got a lot more contentious as you move past that. Not to go into that conversation, but it is a very difficult conversation as to what is a beginning farmer. So I would like to ask if anybody in the room is brave enough, what is a beginning farmer to this room? To me, it's a number. I don't know, $500,000. I don't know what the number is, but to me, it's a number, and I'd like to ask the room what a beginning farmer is to them.
Are you looking for an age or a dollar amount?
Any idea, their idea.
Well, one, yep, Todd. So the comment back to that was anybody that was taking over management or have decisions or for sure the risk, they're just starting, they're the beginning farmer rancher regardless of what their age is. So we're kind of keep moving on or, yep.
So if you, Branya, Wilmore, Roy, if you allow your child to run 10, 15 head, that might be pretty generous. When they're still in high school, they're 14, 15 years old, then they're already out of the beginning farmer and rancher program by the time they're 25. They technically have ownership, they're claiming that on their taxes. So, but they have had no control of land, they've had no opportunity to buy land, they just graduated college. What about that situation? And I think the right way to get your kid invested in the operation and to want to come back is to have them be invested in the operation with their own livestock. But that's the challenge.
Kean Holzer, I think you get around that with how you structure your entity when your child takes over, whether he's had cattle since he was 4 years old. Once he takes over, whether he starts an LLC or whatever, there's your beginning structure.
That's not how the program is right now.
So let's talk a little bit about getting this younger generation in. We've turned it as barriers to entry, and what are those barriers to entry? And for sure, the first two topics that always come up is access to capital and access to land. And what can we do better to at least address those two topics?
Dennis Dishmaker from Lewistown. I think one of our problems is our older generation, which I'm getting right up in there now. And I know before, like when I was in my 30s, there was a lot of parents that wouldn't turn the ranch over until the poor kid was in his 60s. And there's a lot of that. And I mean, who wants to take over the responsibility when he's 5 years from retirement? I know I was very fortunate. My dad gave us the chance to, I don't know why I'm getting emotional about this, but Dad gave us the chance to take over when we were in our late 30s, 40s. And I'm trying to do the same thing. And to do that, you have to have a lot of faith in your kids. And I've got a son now that's selling our calves, sold our wheat. The other one does a lot of the mechanicking, helps out on the ranch. I'm trying to get him more enthused about, or not really enthused, but get him to make more decisions, and he does. But when we were out in the corrals and we're working, we changed our branding situation around for our calves this year. And they used to go out one way, and there was a damn mess because when they went out, they turned around and come back into our working area. This year we turned it around, and they went straight out, and all it took was, well, maybe 45 minutes to an hour between haggling back and forth and changing our minds. But at least 3 of us could make a decision then, and it worked a hell of a lot better. And it was mostly, it was their idea. So I think working on letting our young people start earlier, making decisions, and that's part of this young farmer and rancher thing is, they've got to make decisions on the ranch. And that's when they're going to become the first year people, the first time farmers and ranchers. So that's my viewpoint of it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Up over here, Ian. Ian's on the run. Thank you, Ian.
Shane Slefka from Winifred. The number one key to pass land on to future generations, the days of being able to purchase land, it happens, but that's getting fewer and fewer and fewer. So got to look through the lens of leasing property. And older people, there's a lot of widows out there that own land, and older gentlemen that own land that have been in production agriculture. And it starts with the heart. And you can't legislate the heart, right? But they have to have, I was fortunate because there's someone like this, more than one person like this in my life to give us a start. But anyway, it starts with their heart, and you can't legislate that necessarily, but they have to have a desire to pass it on. And again, I don't mean necessarily selling it, but can we incentivize folks like this? I don't know whether it's through tax breaks, I don't know how, but again, it starts with the heart, but incentives somehow for older people to lease their property to production ag.
Great point. That's actually come up in some of the other listening sessions as well. And that, I guess we could maybe just even dovetail down into, it was part of the mentorship discussion. And, just on where we were in Dillon, we were trying to get, inviting young producers to come up and talk about, hey, what do you need? Well, what I didn't realize is some of those young producers came up to me after the fact and says, well, I need access to more land, but the guy that I bid against was in the crowd. And I'm not big enough, or I'm not established enough to pay as much for that, and I just, I'm just getting discouraged. But, you bring up a great point, is like, is there other programs to make that incentive, if that's a tax base, or what is that? And thank you for bringing that up. It's a great idea.
Chris Deschmaker, and if I could go a step further with that, if there could be some kind of a boilerplate lease agreement that we could use that would also include an option to purchase that land. A lot of times we're afraid to get into these things because it involves lawyers and getting the proper, sorry, Hertha. Not that you're bad, it's just we don't like to pay you. If there would be some place that the ag people could go to say, okay, I want the framework of a lease that I can put together with this young man, and I want him to have some good years under his belt before I really want to sell to him. So maybe I want to do a lease with an option to buy after 10 years or something, or 5 years, or whatever it is. But we might be reluctant to go that route because we don't know what all the legalities are. And if there was some clearinghouse we could go to get some of that information, whether it be through extension or, you know, whatever. And the other point, I want to go back to the young farmer rancher loan programs. I think where we need to be advocating for that is more money, because I was in DC talking with this, and we had a great gentleman with us, Greg Gable, who's a veteran and is taking over his folks' place. So he's not only a young farmer, but he's a veteran, and he discovered that the pool of money for the veterans, the young farmers, and the minority farmers is all one pool. So you got 3 different people pulling from the same pool. So there needs to be more money in that pool, because according to the 2022 ag census, young farmers and rancher numbers are up by 11%, which is very encouraging. That's what we want. But that's 11% more money, or more people that are going for the same funds. So.
And then just to, Ian, what is the amount you can get is 600,000, and would you be possibly recommending that number needs to be bigger? And then obviously the pool that it funds that needs to be bigger, obviously, too. Yep. Any stab at what that number should be, or double? 800,000? Okay. Yep.
Hey, Turk.
Yep.
This is like trying to bid on a bull for me. I'm like, hey, over
Yep.
here.
Sorry.
In the corner. No,
That's
just
why we
kidding.
got Ian. He's awesome.
Leoma Wells Roy. I want to say I really believe in the mentorship idea. And to expand upon that, you have Rachel Frost down there at MSU doing great work with the Dan Scott Ranch Management Program. Of her 15 students entering the program this year, 10 had no experience in agriculture on a practical level. So I also think that we're going to face challenges of folks wanting to come into this industry who have a passion for it, they want to work it, but they don't know what they don't know. And so part of your mentorship program is going to be bringing on folks who've never been out there with cows. They've never worked cows, Dennis. You know, they don't know what that cycle is going to be like. So it's also going to be willing to take these young ones who might not have grown up. Maybe they grew up in Vermont, in Maine, California, and they come out here and they just need someone to give them a chance, because they want to be there and they want to keep this industry going. And what I see so much is, as soon as we see they have no practical experience, we're like, oh, like, I'm out. I want someone who knows, you know, what they're doing already. So we might also have to take a step back and just say, we're going to work with someone who's quite green, but sometimes having someone who's green might be better than having someone who thinks they know everything. So I'm just kind of throwing out that I'm a big fan, Turk, and if you need any help with that mentorship program when it comes around, I would be the first one to step up and say, let's connect people, because I personally have 3 clients right now who've built cow herds for 30 years, and they have no one to leave them to, and their biggest fear, sorry, I'm gonna get a little choked up like Dennis did earlier. Their biggest fear is when they pass away, that land's gonna get broken up and those cows are gonna get sold, and their life's work is gone. And so I think let's match people up. Let's recognize that our industry is changing and not everyone is born into it, but the ones who want to come into it, they just need someone to give them a chance.
Excellent, thank you. One thing to share, I can't remember, maybe it was at Headwaters, we had a veterinarian share that there was a common site, right? There were 4 mentorships. Do you want to talk on that a little bit or share? We're only going to put you on the spot.
So I did sign up for the mentorship through the American Association of Bovine Practitioners, and the person I was paired with just really wasn't looking for mentorship. Like, I reached out to him a few times. So it does have to be something where both sides are really wanting to be helping each other out and getting a benefit from each other. But kind of along the same lines is that, you know, just conversations around the shoot with my clients, I've had more than one person say, you know, we are buying land. And I know there's other ranchers that are buying land and they're making it work. It would be so great if we could sit down with those people and not have it be our neighbor because they're competing for the same land and the same leases that we are, and talk about ideas and throw ideas out like, have you tried this? Has anyone else tried this? Would that work? What do you think about that? And so I do think there would be value in something like that, setting up kind of small groups, maybe from different areas throughout the state, so that even experienced ranchers can learn from each other and from younger people. And there is way more people involved in these internships. I see it all the time. Like, they have no clue about a cow. They have no idea, but they really want to be involved. And so probably some of those people could give some value to some of us that have been in the industry for longer.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Hi, Stan Olson here, Hobson. I guess the other part of this stool is the schools, education. If we want to attract these young families that have been out, especially been in a urban environment, they need to know that they can come back to a vibrant school, to a rural development with some some restaurants, grocery stores, just some basic things that will attract them. But, you know, like, boy, you know, my observation, most of these schools have an awful hard time retaining teachers, and they get out of school and they're really not paid anything, and then they got to find a place to rent. So they're just kind of out in these rural towns here for a bit until they can move to a larger city. So part of this is just urging rural development and helping get good basic services in schools for these young families to attract them to come.
Thank you. Anyone else? You know, let's hit on labor. Yeah. Yep. Here, hold on.
That could speak to some of the stuff they're doing and stuff like that.
Is anybody here from the Winnet
I
Aces?
see a whole Winnet contingency right there.
So we have had a lot of conversation about mentoring, how to get people connected up, young folks, older folks, at Winnet Aces. We do not have all the answers yet, but we're continuing the conversation, and kudos to you guys for bringing this up and getting people in the same room. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been sitting here thinking, so we started from scratch, Skip and I did, and were given an opportunity to buy a ranch and put a ranch together. So it is a passion for me to pass that on. We have no choice. But it would be nice to have a little bit of incentive. So I'll throw Charlie under the bus here. We sold part of our place to Charlie and Reba for what we hoped was ag value. It was a lot, but not. We left a lot of money on the table. So if there could be some incentive tax-wise, or if that money could be leveraged, the money we left on the table could be leveraged some way. It's not going to reach everybody, but it could be incentive enough to get a few more older folks to do it. And I think we just keep beating the drum on that. I feel like in our area that we have reached a few people a little bit, and I think they're thinking about it a little bit more. Some of the older folks. While I got the mic, I'm going to say real quick too, I would encourage anyone, older folks that want to hang on. I admire that. I admire the work ethic. But we had, for the other part of our place, we had 3 young families come and they just want a ranch. They just want that opportunity. We don't have children, so we're looking outside our family, And I have to say, that might even be easier than working with your family, because you don't have all that baggage and history and everything. So I would encourage folks, there's young people that want to do it. It might take a little more work, but there's young people that want to do it. And I'll say real quick on the intern, I'm chairman of the Rangeland Resource Committee, and we have finally got an intern program going that's been awesome, in my opinion. It's been life-changing. Some of the young folks have told us that have gone through it. So I think any of that we can get going is great. Part of our trouble is not having enough host ranches. So if anybody is interested, contact Stacy. She's the gal. She's our coordinator to get into that. So I get that's enough. You don't want it? Come on, Brenda.
I'm Brenda Brady from Winnett, and I guess I would speak a little bit to the community side of things, and especially the school and housing and those types of things. And that's part of, like with ACES, that was part of the conversation initially, is what are the things that we need for people to come home? And whether you're from Winnett or not, that we needed to make sure that we keep our school going, that we have a store, just the basic necessities. And so that's been something that we've really been working on, even daycare. And we're seeing a small but a neat increase, I think, in interest in coming home, and whether that's coming back to the ranch or working remotely and living there because they grew up there and they want to raise their families there. And so I think that's something that's important to think about too with our small communities, how we can include those families that maybe aren't working on the ranch or running the ranch, but how we can bring them back to keep our communities going.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
I have a question of you. If you sell your property at something less than fair market value, does the federal government come in then and say that you have to pay a gift tax on that amount that was?
We did not. We had to pay 30% taxes so on anything over basis. So even though we left a lot of money on the table, then we still had to pay that 30% on anything over basis. Yeah.
Still an arm's
So.
length transaction.
Great discussion. Anybody else?
Kind of just back on the mentorship, one of the things that we talked a lot about in Dillon was huge liability that's put on you. And so there were suggestions about what can we do with state fund or some of the liability components of what a mentorship program or bringing somebody into your operation might look like. So also looking for thoughts and suggestions there on if you guys have ideas, because again, a lot of things are being put at risk when you invite someone that doesn't know what they're doing onto your operation to help with live animals.
Anybody else? Well, let's talk about labor. What are we going to do about it? It seems like, our family, we have several different ranches. We have a couple feed yards. We have some farms. And, it does seem like, and just from my experience, it seems like I can find somebody to get in the $400,000 tractor and with the refrigerator in there. And, and make sure the music and the air and all that is just right. Now, to get cowboys to go out in this last January and every day to make sure the water's flowing, and, oh, yeah, we're going to do it again tomorrow, and we're going to do it tomorrow, and it might be Sunday. Matter of fact, it might be Christmas Day. it just seems like that gets to be tough. So it has been a really interesting discussion, and of course we talked about, you can really get off into the weeds and just talk about, gosh, this new generation, but one thing that has been a tool that we've used is the H2A program, and it's been a significant tool for us on the difference if we were going to grow or not. And Annie, can I put you on the spot to talk a little bit about the H2A program and the goods and the complications? And we follow all these rules, but then you find out that maybe we should have just took a pickup and gooseneck down to El Paso, and it would have been a lot easier. But
yeah, no, you bet, Turk. So Andy Kellum, Hobson. I manage the feed yard out at Hobson, Judith Basin County Farms. We struggled and struggled for 10 plus years to find help, bring them to Hobson if they weren't already there. We had to go outside of our local market because we couldn't find them in our local market. I mean, that just, was the thing. So we advertised online, put ads in the paper, word of mouth, any of those kind of things. And it's, there's, I guess, two things that are the biggest things that I think were the most difficult to overcome is, number one, how close are we to town? And number two, are you going to provide me a place to live? And if you don't, the how close you are to town is probably a bigger, one thing. But, if you don't provide a place to live, then it's just move on to the next, move on to the next, move on to the next. You take yourself out for a lot of potential employees if you can't solve that problem. Now, that's still a problem if you're looking at H2A or foreign, labor. Now, we went down the route of the TN visa, so it's a little bit different than H2A, but it's very similar. And it was, basically the decision kind of came down to if we're going to grow and we're going to get all these things done, we got to do something different than what we're doing. It's just one after another of, I'd like to find them. I'm trying to find them, but I just keep struggling to find them. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, the good is that there's a lot of people out there that are willing to do this work. They just don't happen to live right now in Hobson or somewhere like that. So there's quite a pool out there of people that are willing to do this kind of work. Don't assume anything. I guess that would be my number one thing there. We were just talking about mentoring, and 10 out of 15 students don't know anything about running a ranch, and they're in a ranch management program. Don't assume anything. You might hear that you're hiring people with all kinds of experience. Your definition of experience and their definition of experience are probably two different things. So I had this conversation with a good friend of mine this morning. His hired man of 15 years gave his notice in January, and he has no idea what he's going to do. So he's now he's like, well, I'm going down the H2A route. And that was the advice I gave him was, it's not going to be you. It's not going to be you and your son or you and your dad. You got to get your head around that idea that, it's not going to be you, but it can work. And, we're a work in progress every day. We have 16 employees that are TN visas, and 13 of them don't speak very good English. It's a work in progress every day, but it's been a game changer for our operation, no doubt. No doubt. So, people ask me that same question, how's it going? Well, it's going. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get something done tomorrow, and we're trying to do what we can to make sure that is the direction we want to go. But it takes management for sure. You can't. These aren't the guys. At least in the beginning, they're not these guys where you just turn them loose. Everybody wants that guy that thinks like they do, you know, will do everything just like them and their dad will do, and it's just not that. So you got to get your head around that. It takes quite a bit more daily instruction and that sort of thing. But I do think it's a very, you know, for us, I'm just not sure what else we would do, you know, to find the people that we need to keep the wheels turning every day. So is that kind of what you were
Yep, thank you.
thinking? Yeah.
Yes, over here. Ben, you wanted to?
Dennis Deschmaker again, the sappy one. I've got a friend that has an H-2A or person working for him. And the problem is he can work 6 months. And then he's got to go back. And he stays down there all winter. And then he's got to do all the paperwork to get him back up here. And if we can get good help, we need them to stay here. I mean, we can't have them going back and forth and bringing their families. I know he had some problems with that, but if you could have the family move up, like I said, trying to find some place to live is another thing, but we've got to be able to make it easier to get people to come across, legal people to come across the border. I know I've been at packing plants and shit. Most of the people that work in there are Asian or Hispanic. And they'll come through, the government will come through once a month and clean half of them out because they're illegals. We use family. I have 2 boys and myself, and that's the labor force. There's days we wonder if we're going to get it all days, and then there's other days we don't have to work so hard. There's a bee place in Stanford, guys are in that area, that they have their guys come up. They have their building where they manufacture the honey. The upstairs is the living quarters for them. They stay there. They have beds, TVs, couches, ping pong table, whatever, but they stay there. They don't need to go downtown. They feed them. The whole works right there. And it's a different idea, but it's working for them. So, but I think we need to make it easier to get legal people to come up here and work.
Ben Peterson, Judith Gap. I've had H-2A guys for 6 years now, and we've had good luck with him other than the fact the hoops you have to jump through. If somebody at the consulate, whether it's in Mexico, if they're from Mexico, or on the U.S. decides to have a burr in their bonnet, then you're SOL and you have very little recompense. And that's part of the problem with this, and it's kind of more indicative of the immigration reform thing as a whole. So these guys have been here long enough and done things. And as to the H-2A program, an H-2A program is not a one-size-fits-all deal. So it's not 6 months, it's 10 months, whatever. It's everyone, it's basically, it's contract labor. To a degree, it's kind of like the old labor where they were almost a slave, because when they come up here, it's contract labor. They're only allowed to work for you, and they're not allowed to work for anybody else. If they don't want to work for you, you don't want to work for them. They want them. Their only option legally is to go back home. They can't go jump down and work for the neighbor. That's it. It's kind of like the indentured servant idea of back in the day. It's not what it is, but that's what it is. But so you keep in mind that's what it is, and then also you're also bringing in a different culture. That's one of the biggest things you've got to be aware of, like Andy talks about. They're not who they were. So with that culture things, one of the biggest things you're going to have a problem with is they're not going to bring their families. Especially like if they're coming from Mexico, it's a matriarchal culture as far as the lines. When they get married, they move to the wife's family, and they stay. So the wives typically never come up. It's not a guarantee, but just keep that in mind. The other thing is we've had them long enough that now we want to do green cards, so because we don't want to pay the federal government. I don't want to go through another January where somebody took the bind on me and I had to have my heifers by myself this year. But to get just a green card, this is not citizenship. This is just allow them to cross the border legally and I don't have to pay visas, fees, and all this other stuff. You're talking $20,000, which has probably gone up in 3 years per person. And the system right now is intentionally designed to make it as hard as possible for these people. And there are all kinds of stops and holes that are done. It's very obvious as the laws are written I'm just going to give up. It's very obvious that's the way it's written right now. So keep in mind if you want to do this, and I mean, my experience has been very good with these guys. There's quite a few ranches in the area now that have done this. And they're not all from Mexico, some from South Africa and from other places. So, but also with the H-2A program, there are rules on what they're allowed to do as far as, you can't have them painting houses. You can't, send them out to the neighbor for a day or something like that. There's lots of rules about that. So you just be aware of that as well. But as part of this, you kind of need an immigration reform system as a whole. Because right now, from a financial point of view, if one of those guys wanted to actually make money, the last thing he would do is come across legally, because it costs too much to get across legally. But I mean, it is a good path, and if you're going to do it, do it through an agency. We used one that was primarily sheep herders out of Wyoming, out of Codia, and there's one based out of Lewistown too. So, which I think you worked with.
We started to, but then we switched gears and went with TNPs.
Yeah, and that's a different program. So like I said, so how long they're allowed to stay and how long till they can leave, that's different for every one of them because it's a contract labor system.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody else? Yes, right over here.
So just real quick, I don't know anything about the outside labor part of this. We've been the labor forever. But I'll get back to Brenda's comment about community. If you're bringing in folks from Mexico or whatever, you're not bringing in, like it was mentioned, families. And in our little rural community of Winnett, we're always looking for more kids in the school or whatever. I don't know what the answer is, but that's just one more nail in the coffin as far as keeping your community going, in my opinion.
Good point. Anybody else? Yeah, Andy.
I don't disagree with that comment at all, but we've been trying to hire families. We've been trying to hire families for years and struggling to do that. And that is I 100% see the point. We live in Hobson. We want to be part of the community for sure, doing everything we can to spend our money in the community. But it's just gotten to the point where not everybody shares the dream of wanting to live in Hobson, and so that's the reality that I've faced with is I want to live out there, but trying to find that next family that I can move in there from somewhere else, it's been really tough to do that. So.
Is there some incentive, some help that could help you get a family? I don't know what the answer is, but I just worry about our communities surviving without bringing new families in.
Connie Algren, Grass Range, and what we need is profitability, so we can bring the kids back. We have one son on the ranch, and he does have cows, and yeah, eventually we do want to, but we have to be able to make it profitable for both of us. So we need ideas.
Yeah, so we'll get to our kind of what we're going to call our open mic part, and virtually if there's some other topics you want to bring up that you feel like could make a difference, this would be in this part of our program. Again, we want to keep it to these topics and not bring up the topics I mentioned before, and so we'll just open it up if anybody has anything they'd like to share.
I'm Dick Rath. I'm from Lewistown, Montana, and I guess rather than sound I would like to speak a little bit about your title of profitability. As you go around the state and you're getting news coverage on profitability, I think it's a great thing here, and I think it's a great thing that you're going around the state to get different. When you're marketing something, I think you need to take a look at who your ultimate customer is going to be. And I'm not real sure the guy walking down the street is overly worried about your profitability. I think he may be worried about your sustainability. I think he may be worried about open spaces. He may be worried about food security. But to explain profitability to him in the beef market in terms of what the rancher gets and producers and stuff all the way down through the food chain, that's a difficult sell. And so, not saying that you need to revisit your title, but I think, if you look at the one company here or organization in Lewistown had a 3-word name, they dropped the last name off of there in order to accomplish a little bit different goal. I've listened to 2 of these meetings and I've scoped out the 3rd one, and I think you're on the right track. One of the things that I think we're missing is that Montana is an easier sell. We have more friends in Montana. We have more relationships with Montana ag groups, and I think we're really not talking too much Montana. And this is a legislative year in Montana, so a couple of the things that I'll throw out that I'd like maybe to see, they don't deal with profitability, but they do deal with sustainability. All of the major river valleys in Montana have become overhoused. When you look at the water rights that were involved in those areas, those by default go back down the river, and they're become open game for almost anybody. Municipalities, fish, wildlife, and parks, recreation. I think somewhere along the line we need to look at water right not priority, but give agriculture a priority for those water rights somewhere down the line. Do we have pivots out in circle eventually in our lifetime or well past our lifetime? Water is very critical to Montana. I'm not going to carry on for too long. 30-some years ago, my brother Jim and I looked at putting a severance tax on ag and timberland production that went into home sites and developments. I think that idea was pretty good then, and maybe not so much now. We were going to take those funds, we were going to put them into research, we were going to put them into young farmer loans and any other different categories that go, but their land continues to go into subdevelopment, and somewhere along the line, if you look at the recreational marijuana tax is over $100 million. Those guys aren't buying an acre of land to blow up their nose, and that tax accumulates pretty darn fast, so it would be a good source of income. And so with that, I think we really need to look at Montana and what we can do in Montana. I've heard a lot of ideas here today, but really Montana maybe should be our focus. So thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Yep, sure.
I'll stand up so I can
face the crowd, but again, my name's Chuck Ryan from down at Melville. First of all, my condemnation to stock growers and the LMA and the auction marks. This is overdue, but it took good leadership to bring this about, so thank you for this opportunity. One of the major issues I think that's facing this industry, it's not been brought up yet tonight, is the beef industry guidelines from the USDA. They have reduced the consumption of beef by these guidelines over the last 60 years. Reading today on the USDA My Plate daily checklist, this is what the housewives in America are reading. I'm not going to go into all the food groups, but the protein group is this: 5.5 ounces of protein per day. And they start with suggesting in order what you should eat. So mix up your protein foods to include seafood, beans and peas, unsalted nuts and seeds, soy products and eggs, and finally, lean meat and poultry. We've got a problem, folks, with USDA food pyramid, and we need to take action to fix that, and we can do that. It's never been proven that saturated fat in red meat causes heart disease, cancer, diabetes, or any autoimmune disease. Never been proven. But there are studies with data showing the positive effects of essential need for saturated fats in our diet. We're missing the boat, and we can do something about it. So to do that, you got to have some steps you need to take to do it, and I'm going to give you a few of those. Number one, dietary guidelines need to remove the 10% cap on saturated fats, since there's no negative health effect that's ever been associated with them. The Dietary Guideline Committee must disclose their conflict of interest prior to making any recommendations for the 2025 guidelines. Number three, the USDA must begin to use evidence-based science only in these guidelines. Right now, it's politics, and it's folks that don't want cows on the land that are influencing this guideline. Number four, the USDA must remove language in the guidelines avoiding or limiting red meat in the diet, because again, it's just never been proven to cause adverse health effects. And five, and I think this one is taking care of itself, the USDA must cease to invest in the cellular growth meat. That thing has kind of fallen flat on itself, but we need to remain vigilant on that kind of an issue. So I would encourage Ray Lee and Turk, if we could get some of these points I've made into the record, and I can talk to you later about doing that. What I'm going to say next, I've not been asked to say by anybody in this room. If you're not a member of Montana Stock Growers, you see Ian before you walk out the door and write a check tonight. These folks are doing yeoman's work for this industry, and they need all of us to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep.
I appreciate all the feelings that have been shared tonight. I think that that's a huge key that plays into a lot of these topics that you talked about. Open communication and early. If you want your place to stay in production, let somebody know that, whether it's your children or your neighbor or whomever. So keep talking. It's not, I know it's not popular, especially kind of with this crowd, about talking about your feelings, but it's worth it.
Yes, that is great. Yes. Thank you, Heidi.
I know it's the big bad federal government, and I don't know that, I don't know what the solution is to combat this, but the Endangered Species Act is being used specifically to bludgeon the beef industry or to make it hurt. And I just want, I don't know that what we can do. I don't have the answers, but the grizzly bear does not need to be on the endangered species list anymore, but it's still there. And it's targeting specifically industries that graze.
Okay, thank you. I will comment on that. That's an issue that I think Rayleigh and Ellie work on, probably not every day, but pretty close. Yeah, they just keep coming at us. It's interesting. We've had, Jesse might know this, we've had a rider on appropriations bills since 2014 or 15, defunding, not allowing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list the sage grouse as endangered. So we've been successful in preventing that delisting. At the same time, then the BLM just comes after us and says, okay, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of new acres designated as areas of critical environmental concern to manage these sage grouse. So, you beat them back one place, they come at you in another one. Yeah, we had some good news, but so it's been about 14 months ago when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came out and said, well, they were going to do a 12-month review, do the math there, on whether to delist the grizzly in the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem and the Yellowstone, Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. No word yet. They turned down out of hand a petition to delist the grizzly in all 48 states. So, what's going on there, I don't know, probably waiting for the election would be my guess. But, so now they come out with let's list the wolverine as threatened. Well, do they have really good data that says the wolverine is threatened? Not that I've seen. As a matter of fact, what I hear is behind some of that is we're actually seeing more wolverines coming down. More people are seeing them in their yards or someplace, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is worried that, with more wolverine-human interaction, the people will start killing the wolverines, and so that's why they should be threatened, not because there's fewer of them. But anyway, you're absolutely right, and it's frustrating, but it is something we're working on all the time.
All right, so on that, I have another thing from Fish and Wildlife Services, but something you can do. On February 6th, they announced, or they proposed, they want to remove pesticides, GMOs, and grazing management from all wildlife refuges in the U.S. A committee did work really hard at getting the comment deadline extended, so that is actually open until May 4th. If you feel so inclined, please go on and comment about how we need all the acres we can in production agriculture, and taking wildlife refuges away is not a great choice. It's only going to hurt both the consumers and the producers.
Hello, my name is Shane Clacken. I'm from Grass Range, born right here in Lewistown, raised on a ranch south of Grass Range near the N-Bar Ranch. One of our west fence lines, a very small portion of the N-Bar. We don't have 300,000 acres. We have 100th of that. And I left here in 1980 because I didn't see a way to stick around. I didn't want to anyway. Went and took me 6 years to cram in a 4-year college degree. Went off and did Army stuff and firefighting stuff and Customs and Border Protection, and came back 38 years later, about 6 years ago now. I'm getting more involved in stuff right now because of what I saw when I got back. It's interesting when you come back after being gone that long, the old families that were there in 1980, they're still here now, which is great. they're a lot older, but the thing you don't see is new people coming in. Like you've already said, you know, anywhere from the housing problems to jobs to so on and so forth. Me and my sisters are in line to inherit my dad's ranch. There's 4 of us, so succession planning is one of our great interests. We don't want to sell it. We've been offered from NBAR to buy it. We don't want to do that. What we're trying to do is figure out how to keep it. You know, my dad hasn't run cattle since 1977, and my job now is just to make sure that ranch is ready for cattle to show up. You know, fences and infrastructure, water, you know, roads, that kind of stuff. But there's some other interesting things on the horizon. You got the Executive Order 14008 that was just passed, when it talks about basically what that did is empowered all the alphabet agencies to implement and further the 30 by 30 plan. There's a lot of things going on there. I've been told by the APR, by other people, to not like the APR, but when asked why, they go, they can't articulate it very well. So I went into Lion's Den and I went and talked to them. I think they, quite frankly, individually, personally, like all people, really think they're doing a good job, want to do a good job, but it's the overarching 14008 that's driving the whole process. And it's that's actually concerning, one of the more concerning things to me, because they want to bring this entire area under pre-European condition. In other words, no roads, no buildings, just back to the way it was. And all them agencies out there in the federal government are empowered to do that. And it's happening right before your eyes. Again, I don't think the people are bad. I think they really do think they're doing good stuff without the overarching thing. So as a result of all those things, I'm getting more involved. I decided a long time ago I'm not going to complain, because I found out what complaining does. Nothing. To you, to me, it doesn't help anything. It doesn't even further anything. So I'm running to be your representative for this area in Lewistown, Winnett, Grass Range, Roy, Winifred. Hopefully at the state level, if there's some barriers we can put in place or some things we can add to help the farm and ranch community, I want to stay in. I want to see this farm and ag community succeed, because that's where my heritage is at. Even though I don't do what you guys do every day, I don't pull calves, I don't hay, I just make sure the ranch is ready. But I think it's important that, like I said, this is my third interaction with the Stock Growers Association, and you can tell they're doing good work. They really care what's going on. And hopefully everybody together. Oh, by the way, another thing I learned is those people in office need your phone call, they need your letters, they need your visit to their office, because that's what they hear. You know, Stock Growers Association, great organization, they're in there doing that. They're an entity, but the individuals are important too. So people who are running for office, Rick Holden here running for office, those are the guys also they need to talk to. It's going to take everybody. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, one last call. We're going to try to wrap it up. We've been here. Oh, perfect. Ian, do you want to start grabbing the cooler? Perfect.
Yeah. Gilles Stockton from Grass Range, but I'm not running for any office. Yeah, it's been a really interesting discussion, and the issues that you guys have brought up, I think is really, really important. I mean, you're right about the guidelines for beef. I mean, it's crazy, right? Cows are not causing the world to get warmer. I mean, it's one issue. We need families. We keep the schools going, and I mean, how to get our children and younger people back into agriculture is a conundrum. And like Dick was saying, I mean, we've got to. This is Montana. We've got a lot of advantages to work with. We need to do that. And help. Boy, I could use a couple of guys to put up a machine shed for me. It blew down. But I don't think I want to get an H2 program just to put up a shed, so maybe I'll just have to leave the machinery outside. But I was thinking about what's the headlines from this meeting? I mean, if there's a reporter here, I don't know if there is, you know. Ranchers plead poverty. Ask for more government subsidies and protection from to keep $26 million worth of inheritance. That would be today's headline, wouldn't it? Now, you said you're worried that Congress isn't going to pass the inheritance tax level next year, which they're supposed to, right? Well, I wouldn't worry much. Just a bunch of millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires. They're going to look after themselves, right? They don't need us running interference for them, right? And meanwhile, this industry has hemorrhaged 50 million independent feeders in the last 10 years. But we can't talk about market competition, can we? That's all I've got to say.
Excellent. So just to keep things going, is there any other quick comments? We'll get to the drawing here, Rayleigh.
Right. Well, we have 3 questions we want to round out, so pull your cell phones out. Pat, maybe as they do that, if you want to come down, Pat, we'll have you come draw for the cooler since you're here. But let's go to the first question there, Ellie. So we talked about 5 different areas today. As Turk said, these are starting points. So what we would like you to do is, of those 5 areas of focus that were presented, please rank those on your screen. And it's like a slide and drop if you aren't sure how to rank those. You can scan the code again and enter the scan the QR code and enter the code.
Hey, Ian, this we got the same problem we had.
You might just have to hit refresh at the bottom.
I had to phone a friend. You're probably right.
All right. Looks like there's still a few things coming in. Just drag or swipe it up to the top. Bye. Right, we will give you about 10 more seconds, no pressure, but folks want to win the vaccine cooler, so we'll keep it moving. All right, it looks like everybody's kind of submitted, so we'll head to the next one. What topic from tonight's discussion did you find most valuable? As you guys are kind of submitting your answers, I did want to share that Turk mentioned it, but on the Montana Stock Growers website, mtbeef.org, we do have a form available. So if you were not, or if you didn't want to talk in front of the group tonight, or in the next couple days you have some windshield time and you think of the magic ticket or a great idea, we would encourage you to go to our website and submit additional comments. We would love to hear from you as we continue this process, because I think this is a living document and a living process, and the more we can build upon it, the better. there's additional submissions coming in. I'll also do my sales pitch plug that if you, many of you are members of Montana Stock Growers, but there's many of you who are members of other organizations as well. We really want to work to kind of have these discussions further. So if you have opportunities for us to further these discussions in other meetings or locations, please reach out to myself or our leadership team, and we would love to coordinate that with you. We've also been chatting with other livestock groups across the western United States and plan to expand it across the country as well. But there are other states that are looking at similar initiatives, have passed policy, and really want to kind of grow this momentum as we look at it from a national perspective and not just a state perspective. All right, Ellie, and our last question. How can MSGA or the Producer Profitability Initiative serve you and your family's operation? And with that, Turk, I'll kind of hand it over to you for some closing comments. And I did see Kyle sneak in. So Kyle, did you want to make any comments before we close? Come up here so we can thank you for opening up your facility and allowing us to come in tonight.
Well, yeah, I certainly want to say thank you to everybody coming from not just right here at Fergus County, but great to see a lot of outfits in the parking lot. These are discussions we need to have. I think we can find we've got more in common than what we want to admit sometimes between these industry groups. So having open discussions like this certainly healthy and probably need to have more of as we move forward. Cinch up for some good days ahead. There's a lot of optimism out there, and we're certainly seeing that everywhere from the weigh up cows right now to the feeder cattle to the bred stock and these bull sales. So anyway, yeah, we appreciate the stock growers stepping in, and sorry I kind of missed most of the party, but great job.
Well, thank you, Kyle. And before we do closing comments, we'll have Pat come down. Western Ranch Supply and BI have partnered together to give a vaccine cooler away to each of our listening session meetings, and so we will draw for those of you who registered. Oh, no. Excellent. It looks like our winner is Gail Regal from Wrigley from Moore. Oh, congratulations, Gail. And make sure you grab Ian, and he wants to take a picture of you and your new cooler for Facebook. So again, thank you, and Turk.
Well, we sure appreciate everybody coming out and spending this amount of time. You know, we can't emphasize it enough on how we wanted to really take a really special effort to go across our great state to have these conversations and really open up the discussion. You know, we've had leaders from all other different ag organizations come to these meetings. We've had Bill Bullard, who's the CEO of RCAF. We've had Jess Peterson with U.S. Cattlemen's. We've had Farmers Union. We've had Farm Bureau. It is important that we all work together on these topics. And we need to set aside some differences in saying, hey, can we get some wins here for our communities? It's important that we all work together. And it's been brought up, well, okay, well, now what? Well, our now what is we're going to finish these across the state. You're going to have a chance to look at the feedback. I encourage you to go to our website, mtbeef.org. You can see it, you can look at every session, and you can pick up different ideas. And if something, you have an aha moment and you want to share that, please get online, type it up, send us an email, whatever, because we want to make sure that we get all of the ideas, because we are going to go to Senator Tester's office. We are going to go to Senator Dane's office, and we are going to carry your message to try to make a difference. And we are very serious about it. And that's why we're trying to make an extra special effort, and we are going to help carry this across the line. So we really appreciate that. And if there's anything else we can do for you, please let us know. And so lastly, again, Kyle, thanks for sharing your house with us today. It's very good, and hopefully we brought some goodness to you all tonight too. And thank you.